Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. McCausland, can you please take roll?
Mrs. Feiss.
Here.
Mr. Grisbeck.
Here.
Mrs. Hoppy.
Here.
Mrs. Janasek.
Here.
Mr. McGregor. Mr. Modrak.
Here.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
Mrs. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have a number of recognitions from
We
William
have
Penn.
some of Bethel Park's finest students from our elementary building here. I'd like to welcome these students from William Penn Elementary who have been recognized by their school for some outstanding service to their school community. We have 2 groups in attendance tonight. We have a group of students who serve on the bus ramp for bus supervision and crossing traffic and keeping everybody safe out in front of the school. And we have another group that ran a recycling team at the school. And we wouldn't have had either successes without these students' participation and their everyday energies to get this stuff done. So we're so glad to have them here tonight so we can honor them and hope that they keep this service up throughout the rest of their years in Bethel Park.
Keep making William Penn great.
Yes. So we have certificates for them, and I'll ask our president to bring them up. And
We box ourselves in like this. Yes, that might work great. You read it.
Okay, the first one goes to Preston Christian. Okay, wait, we got all kinds of pictures, guys. And so will Dad. The next one is Eric Wells. Eric Wells? Oh, okay. Is it Briella Schaefer? Okay, these are the recycling ones now. Faye Kirstein. Okay, Mr. Cromie's getting out so Mom can get it. Bria Simmons. Marino Mons. Did Dad get his? And Braden Frolich. Come on, Mrs. Zell, let's go. There's the lady, the reason the buses run so well. Come on, Brian.
Kids fight to get into pictures, adults fight to get out of it. All right, here we go. Okay, ready, big slides? 3, 2, 1. 3, 2. Does anyone else want to take one? Get in there.
Thank you. That was. At this time, we will open up the floor to any public comments on agenda items. Anything related to the agenda tonight?
Hi, Sue Beans. I live at 3484 South Park Road. I wanted to discuss the policy regarding the survey to the students on diversity and equity and inclusion. I just found out about this afternoon, and I was looking over all the surveys, but I began to look at the one for kindergarten, first grade through fourth grade, and I have a lot of questions and concerns. First of all, do you think a kindergarten person knows what optional means? You put a piece of paper in front of a child and they begin to fill it out, right? I know my name. Here's a place I write my name. Do parents know? Are they going to read these surveys and approve these surveys? Will they see them? When a kindergarten child asks you, say, I don't know what this question is. What is my gender? Who is going to explain to them the choices? They don't even know what gender is. And race. There's another one. How will a child know I'm in first grade or second grade? What does that mean, my race? And so it looks like a fishing expedition. It looks like a can of worms that's going to create more problems. Hey, when I grew up in Bethel Park my whole life, we were the melting pot of success. Move to Bethel Park and work hard and we'll all succeed. So I don't understand why we're asking children to put themselves in categories. Thank you very much.
Any Collins? Any other questions, comments? None? Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to committee reports. Mr. Scalzo, can you walk us through the curriculum committee?
Yes. Okay, we have 7 items under curriculum committee. The first item is approval of social studies curriculum. 2, Slippery Rock University student-teacher contract, Duquesne University student-teacher contract, California University of Pennsylvania student-teacher contract. Number 5, St. Francis University student-teacher contract. Number 6 is the school climate surveys, and 7 is the revision to school-sponsored overnight educational activities. This is up for discussion on any of the items.
Can we have number 6, the school climate surveys, moved to discuss separately from all of the other items when we move it to the voting agenda, or how?
Non-consent. You don't want it on the consent agenda.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I would like to recommend that number 1 be removed from the consent agenda as well. Any questions on any other items there?
I have some questions concerning the surveys. Is this the time to do that at this point? Okay. So for information for the public, why do we do these surveys? And where did they come from? Like, where did they originate?
The surveys were generated from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We got the question bank from their surveys they do for school climate. They also require schools to do climate surveys in relation to school safety factors, related, for instance, bullying issues that students may be experiencing. So during our previous school safety audit conducted by the Auditor General's office, there was a concern that we didn't administer climate surveys. These surveys were modified, shortened, condensed considerably from what the original versions of these surveys are at the state level. There's also where at board request are going to be opt-in surveys. They're not opt-out, so they're going to be sent home and do it if you want. Don't do it if you don't want to. It's not a requirement. It's not going to be handed out to children in school. They'll be sent home.
And can you define what school climate means, please?
Yeah, it's the student experience, the non-academic aspects of being in the building.
Okay. There were a few other questions I had written down. Sorry. The results of the surveys, what will be done with that information?
Depends on the question, but some of it would feed to our school student assistance teams, our threat assessment teams. Some of it can be fed to the principals for their use on planning activities or supporting students. Policy related to student safety can be addressed from the results. And we have several items in our school district strategic plan related to this data that we want to track our progress, making sure that students feel welcomed and supported in the school district.
So those results, will they be driving policy changes or, changes in code of conduct or, what impact will they have directly on our schools, and how will the information on these surveys be quantified? Because there are a lot of blanks to fill in as far as it says, if you don't feel safe in school, why not? Please explain. So, can you just go into that a little bit more, please?
Sure, that's the kind of data that I think a principal would want to know. If a student's having a difficult time or a group of students are having a difficult time or don't feel welcomed in the building, we'd like to know that. And so those open-ended boxes would be perfect data to feed to our principals. You asked if it would influence policy. It could potentially influence policy if we discover a trend or a problem of significance that can be addressed through a student handbook or a code of conduct policy.
And what would institute a trend? As far as number of respondents or...
Yes.
And do we anticipate a large number of respondents?
I would be surprised. Being opt-in, I think we'd be lucky to get a good response rate.
Okay. So the purpose of the survey is to, if I understand it correctly, to make sure that our schools are warm and welcoming places for students to be.
Yes.
Okay.
But I guess just one other question. The thing that we changed, though, is that last year it was done in class. This year, it's more under parent supervision, right?
Well, last year it was just the high school students and the
Okay.
IMS students.
Okay. But it was in class?
Correct.
During homeroom or whatever?
Correct.
So when we did the surveys last year, what did the data reveal?
Nothing to write home about. We didn't have enough responses for it to be of substantive value, and we think that the questions were probably too many for students to take their time and do it well. So we've shortened it. We tried to make the survey more user-friendly, student-friendly, and we're hoping that we'll get some more usable data because we put ourselves out there in our strategic plan to create a school climate for our students that all students would feel welcomed and successful in our schools, and we have no other way to track that. That's just an arbitrary idea, and we believe these surveys could help us track if we're actually doing what we said we want to do.
Okay, question number 5 on the high school, the IMS, and the Neil Armstrong survey. To what group do you feel like you belong? Example, marginalized, majority, struggling learner, etc. I can understand why a parent would be concerned with that question because it makes the assumption that the student feels like they belong to a certain group, and the examples presented may not represent the group that a student feels like they're in. I actually posed this question to my college student, and she said, she jokingly said, "Well, after that question, now I'm confused because I don't belong to a group. I'm just a student." So these types of questions would lead the public to believe that we are on a fishing expedition and that we're looking to see, to group children in a way that may not necessarily be healthy for them, and maybe planting seeds that weren't there before. So I don't know if anyone on the DEI committee can address those concerns or those issues. Mrs. Janicek.
I am interested in that disaggregated data. I would like to see how students who are not like the majority of the students feel about their experiences. I would like to see if students with disabilities, for instance, have a different experience in our school than students without disabilities. I think that as a school, we owe every student who comes to school a warm, safe, and welcoming environment so that they can be engaged and learn. And not all students have the same experience in school. And I preferred the much more specific questions that we had in the survey before. However, at least that is an opportunity for a student with a disability to say that if they feel it is pertinent. If a parent doesn't want to answer the question, then they won't, because it is now being taken at home with parents.
And just to continue to clarify that the surveys, all surveys, are optional.
Correct.
They are not given during class time. They are not given in the school building at all.
Right.
Making sure that that's very clear.
And even within the survey, like even if you do choose to take it, that question number 5 is an optional question. So you could choose to do the survey if you find the overall survey beneficial. But if you get to number 5 and you're kind of confused by the wording, or really confused by the wording in looks like most of the questions, if not just about all, you can choose to answer the ones that you would like to, and then leave out the ones that you wouldn't like to.
So then are you getting a complete picture of the data that you're looking for if they're just picking and choosing what questions they answer?
Well, we would have had a lot more specific data before it was reduced.
Right. I think you still do have, that data on specific questions. The sample sizes would obviously be different. You could have 70 answers on question number 7 and only 60 on question, number 8, but that would still be a, sufficient sample size if there were any very clear trends that you notice. Like, we do a really bad job at making sure that students feel safe in the cafeteria or making sure that they feel safe on the bus. Like, if one of those numbers really jumps out as different than the other ones, then I think that's a really good way to take actionable steps, like Dr. Walsh said, and it said, okay, well, maybe we need to make sure that, we're getting more bus aides on the buses for elementary students because they're consistently not feeling safe here, and that's something that we need to fix. So that's how I see the data possibly working. And to Sharon's point, if there was a specific group of students that, maybe we did have some students who had a disability and answered question number 5, and we saw that those students were performing particularly poor on a certain question, maybe we could address that accordingly.
So how much data do you need to then have a data-driven decision? Like, how many respondents would you need to say, okay, we have a problem here?
I would much rather that this survey be taken in school opt out, but that's not how you wanted to go with it. So,
Oh, no, that was the solicitor that told us we couldn't go that way when we were told we were asking, number 5, when we were asking the question about, are you a struggling learner, which could infer private papers that each child has. That wasn't us, that was the solicitor.
Could you comment on that, just because I was under the impression that that's only the case if the student had to name themselves? I was under the impression that you said if the student was anonymous, that was okay. But I may have misunderstood.
So, yes, I'm thinking solicitor. It was when my wonderful
Oh, yeah, of
colleague
course, sorry,
Anne-Marie
sorry,
was
yeah.
here, so I'm going to take a stab at the thinking
I didn't
there.
mean to put you-
Well, no, that's okay, because the thinking behind a question like that, you know, I don't think that there's not a bright line that says, no, you can never ask a question like that in the school setting. I think when a family answers a question like that, it can open up, you know, a set of responses that then trigger the school district to respond and possibly initiate evaluations under special education programming. It can open up other things, right? So to answer the specific, if the specific question is, can this be implemented in school? Yes, it can be, as long as very, very transparent opt-out procedures are utilized. That's my answer under the PPR, the Pupil Protection of Rights Act.
So to have the most useful data, you'd have to get more people to take it and probably provide more bubbles for answers. But it is what it is at this point.
Correct.
I would like to make a quick comment on it. I think parents should have the choice in this matter when they're dealing with their children. So whatever the survey is, I absolutely believe that they should have the ability to opt in if they prefer that or not. That gives them complete oversight for their child. And number two, I don't think it should ever be during school hours, because that's time away from curriculum and other things that the kids and teachers have to do. So to take school time away for a survey, I don't think that's the best decision I don't think that's the best decision for our students, especially when we need to improve our math program. We looked at that outcomes report, and we know that we were 50% proficient. So we have other areas that we really need to focus on. And, you know, our vision as a board, I think that every one of us who, you know, ran different campaigns have all said at some point that we would like to see Bethel Park's rankings higher. So I think that we really need to pick something and get great at it and not do a bunch of things. A bunch of things, you're spread thin, you lose focus, you lose discipline. And I think that we really need to focus in on reading and math. And I think that's the direction we need to go.
Can I weigh in? I have to agree with you, Mr. Scalzo. I don't think it needs to be done during academic time. And I think this is a parent's choice to answer this survey. You know, and it also, I kind of had a conversation with my oldest, not about this survey, but the one that was given last year. And she just said, first off, it was too long. Second of all, too many things. And she's like, why was I categorizing myself? So that was the conversation we had last year. It was a conversation we had a couple of nights ago at our own house. So I am for the parent opting in. My understanding is every parent in the district will be sent an email to choose which surveys per child. And I think we need to say academic time is academic time, and the survey time is a time for parents and the child if they choose to do the survey, and if they choose to submit the survey to give us the information, or if they choose to keep it in-house and keep it as a discussion at home. It's the parent choice.
I'm just going to say this as an educator. I think that everybody that's chiming in are people that are fortunate enough to have well-adjusted kids who probably don't have any issues, and that's awesome. And it'd be nice if every kid was like that. I think that the stuff on this survey is the stuff I hear every single day because I do teach kids with special needs. And every day I hear, I am terrible, I suck, and that's not my life skills kids. This is like my learning support population. Nobody likes me, I'm gonna fail out of school, I need to talk, I'm so upset, I'm gonna kill myself, I wanna cut myself. That's the stuff that, whether you like it or not, these are kids in your school, and we need to know in order to help them. So this survey is not designed for your typical kids who go to school and are happy and participate and everything's fine. We're fishing for kids that are struggling, who don't fit in. So I'm sorry, right now, I feel like my head's gonna explode because everybody doesn't fit into a pretty little box. It's a public school, we serve everyone. So these questions are important to find kids who don't want to live, who aren't happy, who aren't thriving. That's.
I guess I just have one question on that. If you can just give me a minute. With those kinds of students, would we expect them to share that through a form? I guess that's the thing. Yeah. Would we expect, with the students you talked about, would we expect them to share that information on a form? Because I can tell you, my experience of being a parent is, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they will tell the teachers.
They're going to tell the teachers, they're not going to tell the parent.
Right, and it's, sorry.
That goes on in the school, we know what's going on. Well, don't do the survey, it's optional, don't do it. I don't give a shit, I'm just saying, sorry, but I'm just saying that it's not a perfect little, it's unbelievable to me that people think this is how everybody lives. No, it's not. There are a million kids in these schools and they have problems that are way beyond anything you can understand because we didn't live during social media. We didn't have the questions that we're sitting here in a big white room with a bunch of straight people. Ugh.
I will say that through the years of talking to families in this district, many years, many families, there are a lot of children and a lot of families who would like the opportunity to share their experiences with the school. And if your kids aren't in that category, awesome for you. But there are plenty of children who would like to share their experiences about how they feel in school, how they are treated, what might help them. And I think it is incumbent upon us as a public school district to care about those children more than the people who are offended by the fact that there's a survey. It's optional. Parents get to decide if their children do it, which, by the way, parents had a choice last year too. If it bothers you, don't fill it out. But please do not try to interrupt children and families who have information to share that is pertinent to the health, safety, and welfare of children in this school from providing it.
So I think you're misunderstanding my motive for asking questions about these surveys. I'm not saying don't do a survey, but I do feel that it's important that the parents in the district understand why, what will we do with the results. I had all of those questions during the first round of surveys, and nobody answered those questions for me. So when questions go unanswered, or it looks as if something is a certain way and nobody explains it, guess what happens? Everybody still thinks the same way and sees things as if we're doing something shady or trying to do something, and I'm not done. Thank you.
I haven't said anything.
I thought you were going to jump in there again. I think it's unfair to say that even if one of our board members would prefer the surveys not go out, that they don't care about children who desperately need help, because I think teachers, very much like you, Buffy, can recognize those children are talking to their teachers. All I'm saying is that the public needs to understand where these things are coming from, why we do them, why these questions are the way they are, what we're asking children. Yes, it's opt-in, and parents have a choice, and I believe that's the way it should be. But again, I think parents have a right to know what's being done with the data that we collect on their children, and how that's driving our educational policies or our curriculum or our support services. I think it's good for the community to be aware of those things so that if there are questions, then we're being transparent. It's a transparency issue, really. And so I'm asking the questions to make sure that people understand what we're doing, why we're doing them. That's it.
I don't disagree with you about information.
So right now, there's like one sentence that is maybe aimed at answering all the questions you ask. Is that something we can elaborate on in either the Google form or the email that goes out to parents in the community to explain why, what we expect the outcomes, but also to remind people that it's optional, and it says it on here. And especially for the lower grades, like 6 and below, we recommend, if possible, do this with, parent and student together. I mean, are these, addressing some of these questions that you're raising?
I agree with you. The comment that I heard last year was parents didn't know about this at the high school. And I know there was an email sent out, but parents don't read all of the emails that they get on a daily basis that say Bethel Park, let's be honest. So more attention to the parent when this is sent out. So if they choose to answer the questions or choose to just have a discussion with their child and then answer the questions based on the discussion that happened with their child, especially in the younger grades, would give us information that, we're all seeking to look at, but giving the parent more control over that situation. Like I said, there were some concerns from high school parents that they weren't totally given all the information last year. And again, I know it was sent in an email, but that, again, they're overlooked. When you're a high school parent, you get easily 1 million emails from Bethel Park. So just get ready.
Do we have to survey the primary at all?
I would vote to survey primary. And I do think that there are a lot of things going on in our district that teachers aren't aware of. Because quite honestly, if teachers were aware of them, the families wouldn't have been coming to me. So it's not that everybody who has a problem is already on someone's radar.
Right, but I'm just saying, do we have to have such a, maybe we don't have to have so many questions on the primary survey. Like, we could do the ones that say, do you like lunch, do you feel safe at school, and stuff like that, but we probably don't need to ask the demographics in the primary school, maybe? I don't know.
Yes. So the primary school one is a little bit parsed down. It's only 7 questions of actual, how do you feel about things? It looks longer because every question has if you check no, please tell us why. And just so public knows kind of the reasoning why that's a little different is because, feelings for elementary students change a lot day to day. One day a child may feel one thing, they may feel great about their lunch class. Another day they may feel terrible because they had an awful lunch. So we just want to make sure that, the reasons that they're writing down are logical and really track that there's, an issue there. Or really it's just nothing and they just maybe had a bad day that day.
One last question concerning the survey itself. So the goal is, as Buffy said, to find struggling children, but we're not requiring a name on the survey. So how do we identify struggling children without the name being on the survey.
Right, that would be like the systemic change that I mentioned. So like if it's a consistent trend such that students are feeling uncomfortable on the buses, if it was only like 5 students out of say like 60 that felt uncomfortable, that wouldn't necessitate a trend such that we'd be, at least personally, this is only my personal opinion, that I would personally be concerned about the safety of students on the bus. But you're right, you wouldn't be able to specifically know those 5 students that are uncomfortable, but I think that's that student's right and prerogative not to say that openly. To Buffy's point, some students may be really comfortable with their teachers or their administration. They may come to them with information. Other students might not. Other students might only feel comfortable sharing this information if they're fully anonymous and they don't have to put their name on it because maybe they want to say something, but they don't fully want to put their name on it, and it would just let us see those overall trends to see if there's a systemic change we need to make.
It would give the principals data to look into in their building.
Let me weigh in a little bit here. Now, in the past, as an educator, I think one of the most important features that we implemented at my school is we take a look at the D's and E's list and determine whether or not those kids are connected to an outside group or activity. That's one data point that teachers and administrators can look at to identify students and what we could do about that. I would imagine a lot of the students are referred to SAP, and it's great that we're having SAP down in elementaries now. And I want to say the request for the counseling services have been increased over the last 2 or 3 months. So these are all good things.
Any more comments on the survey? I had a couple of questions on the social studies curriculum topic. So with that, it's an evaluation. It's kind of written as an evaluation. What is it that we're approving in there? Because there's a lot of things like, requests for IT budget and, tools and things like that. What is it that we're approving, and then what's kind of the time frame behind that approval?
So there are quite a number of things in there that are proposals. And so the motion that's in front of the board is to accept the report and to approve the development of the 2 courses that are offered up as new electives in that course description.
I just want to interject that I was very glad to see us add AP Microeconomics. As someone who took that in high school and had a very good economics program in Hampton, I know, Buffy, you hate econ, I understand. But it was definitely very beneficial for me to have both the AP macro and micro going into college. It gave me a kind of a good initial bump on an econ minor. Question towards that, though, the way that our program was structured, just with kind of how econ runs, was a half year for each, and then allowing the students to take both courses at the end of the year. Would they be running that way, or would they each be a full year course? And if you don't have that information now, it's totally...
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So to answer your second question, the timeline would be once approved, then we would post for someone to do the course writing, and then that would take, potentially the whole summer or longer. Once the course curriculum is completed, it would go through department review and then get added to the course catalog.
Okay. For some of the other recommendations in here, like, technology, textbooks, things like that, could we get an estimate of what that cost is?
Yeah, so we didn't put those into the motion for approval.
Okay, because it's in the document.
Yeah, you're going to. I'm asking you to accept the document, but not to approve everything in it. We only pulled out 2 things. There were 2 courses that were being proposed.
Okay.
Because there's mention of technology that we can't support the purchase of, or staff changes that we wouldn't support administratively. So those aren't a part of the motion.
With 2 courses being added, have we identified any to cut, just so we kind of maintain balance and not diluting our student population across, less students across more classes?
Mm-hmm. No, we did not.
Okay.
Mr. Christensen, are you done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My concern is the numbers that we just saw this afternoon and who is registered for courses in this fall, starting in the fall, and the number of courses that are under the number of 18. If we're going to add new two courses, we need to cut 2 courses. I can't add courses without cutting courses when I've got 30-some classes right now that don't have 18 students in them, and I did not look to see how many of those were in a history or fall under a history business with the economics. But my concern is, again, we're watering down the numbers, and we're not giving the best academic experience to these students. Having 15 to 18 kids in a classroom for discussion and those kinds of things is much more academically strong for our students than to have 7 students in a class. The thought process, the academics, the sharing of information, the whole working together in different groups throughout the semester is not there. I have some concerns that I don't know that I can approve this if we do not cut classes.
Again, the AP micro, I don't know if we have an honors level, but, you know, could we look at, you know, transitioning honors class to AP rather than running 3 different levels, the academic, honors, and AP, because it seems like that also is diluting our base and creating smaller class sizes, which they're extremely small. I mean, we looked at that list earlier.
I checked the list, Ms. Turner, and there weren't any social studies on there. Or if they were, there...
Business ones on
does the
there.
business fall under social studies?
Yes. It's business, economics, what else? There is a social studies class, because your psychology and your sociology honors courses fall underneath that also. There's several of them on here, if I'm looking real quickly.
Which sheet is that? This one?
While we're looking at that, Mr. Christensen, just to answer kind of your question there is just a regular econ class, and then we have AP macro right now. So if we kind of, you know, I don't know what the coordinator suggests as far as half year, full year, but if we went half year macro, half year micro, that would solve that problem of, you know, diluting the class. It would just be 1 AP economics class. And then you would have the opportunity to take 2 AP courses. And just from my personal experience and how it went for people taking the AP test at my school, again, we had a very good teacher for it, but very good results even from just having half year.
Yeah, and my question was just that having these 3 levels. I don't even know if I haven't, you know, looked in the last 5 minutes at our course catalog, but if we've got the academic, honors, and AP, my recommendation would be to eliminate honors in all those and just, you know, push more students to AP because, you know, it helps them and it helps us, the district, from the standings, ranking standpoints.
Did you want to comment?
Go ahead, you go.
I don't know if I'm ready to actually add either one of them right now. Again, it goes back to what I was saying before, our focus on reading and math. Maybe I could ask, you know, either curriculum director. Right now, we do have a current issue with our reading program, right? Are we unified as of right now? Could that be answered? Are we unified when we're looking at wonders, when we're looking at letter people, when you're looking at, are we a unified reading program across all 5 buildings as of right now? Could we say yes or no on that? Yes.
Thank you. At the elementary, we have the same resources in terms of wonders, access to land of the letter people. There's some folks trained.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, are we all doing the same thing? Do we have continuity in all of the schools? And every kid that's coming home is experiencing the same curriculum?
I
Yes
would
or
say
no?
that is not what is currently happening.
Okay, so that is not happening. So before adding classes, I would think that this is a bigger problem because reading is the foundation for every single course these kids are going to take from here on out. And I would like Bethel Park to be great at reading and math before we start adding and adding and adding. I think, again, that's our focus, our discipline. We're lacking that, and I think that we need to refocus. and get on top of that and get our house in order before we just start adding. What are we going to do? What is the action plan for improving and making sure that we have a unified reading program? That is what we need to work on the rest of the school year and through the summer. We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So that's one thing that I wanted to bring up. A second issue that I wanted to bring up, again, I cannot possibly...
By the way, just to interrupt that before you switch topics.
Yeah.
Very valid point. You got to have a strong foundation before you can build anything on it. So.
And if the student cannot read by the time they get to third grade, that they will struggle from that point on. So they won't even be able to do math to the best of their ability if they can't understand the reading comprehension behind a math problem, a word problem. So again, that is key for that individual, that student, to be successful for so many years, ahead of them. Anyway, another point that I wanted to make: grades 5 through 8. When looking at the math program, I did a little bit of investigating in this, and maybe the curriculum directors can help me here. I looked at the current practice. I was talking to some staff members, some parents, to kind of cross-reference what both were saying, just to kind of see if it was similar, if there was a pattern. And from what I'm hearing, the current practice, teachers have the ability to have this 6-period stipend for tutoring across these grade levels. Is that correct? At least answering that? Yes? No? Yes?
We do have a 6-period stipend option, yes.
Okay. And from what I heard is that there's no framework or curricula or standard procedures for the tutoring period. They're not all unified, so it's really kind of up to the teacher with how they're handling these kids. What is if there is standard procedures for all of, if there's 6 teachers doing this across these grade levels, then what are they? What are they all supposed to do? Do we have that document? Do we have these procedures? What is it? I don't know. Okay, so that's another point that I wanted to make. Another issue is that I'm hearing that a lot of students in this 6-period tutoring, they're on a device and they're working on either Khan Academy or Study Island. And it's not teacher-led instruction. It's not a required teacher-led instruction. I don't know. I mean, I've been teaching for 20 years. When I get a 6-period stipend, I'm teaching. Like there is teacher-led instruction. It's kind of awkward and a little bizarre to me that there wouldn't be teacher-led instruction there. So again, maybe it's kind of an optional thing. That's where I guess I'm lacking like the framework. Like, what are we doing there? Another question is, I know we have a program called Ed Insight, and it tells us about student performance, correct? Okay. And with that, we can tell what each kid is doing per anchor, correct? Like, we know that, let's say, if 70 to 80% of our students are getting less than 50% on a particular anchor, we would know that, right? Now, I'm not telling anybody how to do their jobs, but if we have this information in-house, could we take advantage of that information? Let's say I don't know how many kids are in this tutoring class per teacher, but if there's a small group, there's 6 or 7, are we looking at their individual data to kind of look at their particular anchors that they are weak at, so then the teacher could have teacher-led instruction per child for each of those different anchors? I don't know if we're doing that. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, I think that would be a way of improving their PSSA scores and, their skill set in those particular areas. But I don't know if that's happening. Also, I know that this is happening too, that there's five teams of teachers at IMS. So we have 5 teams of teachers, 1 math teacher on each team. So we have a 6th math teacher that provides support. So any of the students that struggle in any one of those 5 math teams are able to see this teacher, at different periods throughout the day. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, then there's a 7th math teacher, which this is, is a little concerned about this. They're a regular ed teacher, and they are co-teaching with one of the 5 teams. So now you have 2 regular ed teachers in one room co-teaching.
Then it's not co-teaching.
Correct, because so again, I know for the last 20 years, I mean, I know what co-teaching is. It's always been one regular ed teacher
Yep.
and one special education teacher, so that the special education teacher can support any of the students that are struggling while the regular ed teacher keeps the group on track, delivering instruction. So now we have 2 top of the pay scale teachers in one room. So you have $200,000 worth of education being delivered in one room. I would like to know, well, I already know the answer to this question. When the kids are scheduled, is it luck of the draw for some children to get 2 teachers, 2 regular teachers on one team compared to the other 4 teams? And it is luck of the draw for some students. I already asked an administrator about that, so I know that that's a fact for sure. Also, if you do that, which we are, having 2 regular ed teachers in one room, you also increase class size, because that entire teacher now is doubled up with another teacher. So we've talked about class size, and we wanted class size to be lower. It's odd to me, again, that you have 2 regular ed teachers in one room. I've even called other districts, other school boards, other administrators that I know. That's not common practice anywhere. Like, you do not have 2 regular ed teachers in one room. That presents a big problem.
Well, just to add to that, though, we're also not supporting IEPs
Correct.
that have co-taught.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would like to know, I know of the 5 teams that the group of kids with the team of 2 teachers have a similar makeup to a couple of the other teams, achievement-wise. So it's just interesting how you have 2 in one room. I would like to know what the scores are like for comparison. Like, are we getting an extra $100,000 worth of improvement and growth?
I can tell you that. I can tell you myself being new, Mrs. Sutton being new. We've been working with the math department. We've met with them a few times, the IMS math teachers, and that's definitely something that she was going to be looking at specifically, was the performance of those sections.
But let me ask both curriculum directors. Throughout your time in education, have you ever seen 2 regular ed teachers co-teach? It's not a common educational practice of any kind, correct?
As far as traditional co-teaching would be model 2 teachers in one room, but from my conversation with those group of teachers, I don't know that it's always 2 teachers in one room. One teacher spoke very highly of that model. I know there are different feelings amongst the team members, but so we're in a place right now as new administrators, fact-finding. We appreciate all the history that's given to us, and I know that Ms. Sutton is putting together a scheduling committee so that we can gain perspective, and her particularly in building the schedule, but knowing that it's math and really trying to support her in that area. So these are all very great, good questions, and questions that we're trying to find the answer to. But no, in my experience, 2 regular ed teachers in a room, Mr. Scalzo, not something that would be common. But I did learn through that meeting with the teachers that co-teacher was pulling out and doing some small groups and things like that. So I think it's not saying that I'm for or against it, but that it is definitely a different model than I would have been familiar with.
But they're not a special ed teacher, so I don't understand.
You're not right. You absolutely.
I mean, it's great if they're a special ed teacher and they're pulling out small groups, but
right.
It's kind of.
I have some other things that I want to kind of bring up too. I know that we've discussed this, and this could be an item to be voted on in the future here, but a possibility of a reduction in world language and tech ed was recommended by admin, where you would have maybe more math intervention. But more math doesn't necessarily mean better results, just because you do something more. Again, I could even use my son as an example, T-ball. I could have him go out and swing that bat 4 hours a day. So we need more practice. We need more practice. Do it 8 hours a day. But if I don't have a plan of action for that child and say, okay, your feet need to be positioned like this, the bat needs to be positioned like this, what I'm saying is that just when we say more intervention or more math, I would not cut 2 other areas just for the recommendation of saying, let's just do more of it. More of all of this that I said is going to give you the same results unless you change your plan. And I would say that, yeah, I would say that, and if we do everything exactly the same for the fall, then we're failing. Like we cannot possibly, and I'm stressing this to all of you, like we cannot do the exact same thing again for the fall. And I won't tell you like, well, you need to have, instead of 5 teams, you should have 6 teams. I'm not going to get into the weeds. Like, we pay you all a lot of money to do what you need to do. But we're just telling you, or I'm telling you, that I feel that we need to see kind of an overhaul of what's happening here, because this is not working at all. And I'm frustrated about it.
Can we ask that as an update? I mean, maybe in the next meeting or next month. I think that
My bright spot next week is about the math training that I'll be offering to K-8 teachers in May.
Okay, and then how, like this extra class that we're going to offer, this extra support, you know, I don't know what classes, you know, we're doing kind of that self-guided study, Khan Academy, but if that's the extra math investment we're making, we'll fail. So if we can get, just kind of see, you know, a little view of the curriculum on those extra math investments, I mean, then we're doing something different. I mean, I've been on the board 6 years. We've looked at these scores on PSSAs, and they've never gotten better because we've never done anything different. So you know, this is the time, and we've got, you know, with some of these retirements going on, we've got a chance to be a little bit more creative in terms of how we deploy our resources, and I'd like to see, you know, what's different about our approach.
And just for clarification, the double period is not something double period of math. It will be an MTSS model. So some students will need additional math. Some students will need additional reading. Some students will need enrichment. So that is something that will be determined based on the student's needs. So you're looking, you know, I know PSSA is a very important number, but I'm also looking holistically at a math growth score and where are the students growing and not growing. What's the teacher see with their eyes and their ears, and hear with their ears when they're working with that student. So for us as an administration, it was not necessarily just, we want double math. We want 40 minutes of instructional time a day in 6th grade to give those children what they need. And it really wasn't about cutting programs or double math. It's about having that time back to allow flexibility within the school day. Because when you look at an exploratory course such as foreign language, 120 hours of instruction, you would expect mastery of something. And so right now what we're looking at, like Mr. Scalzo pointed out, is a lack of mastery of reading and mathematics. So pulling back that time to allow for more flexibility is really what we're after. And so curriculum-wise, every kid is not necessarily going to be getting the same thing. I think where we need to really look at is our core instruction right now, is secure the core. It's core plus more. So we need to look at our core practices as far as coordinating the instruction that every student is getting. That's where we look to make gains right away. As far as giving the teachers the tools they need, the practices they need to succeed, and then using that additional time that we gave back to then provide the individual needs of the students. And for some kids, they won't need intervention. And, you know, moving forward into the 21st century learning models, there are other literacies that we're not really doing well at, like computer science and coding. And, you know, there are other things, when you look at the employability skills that these children are going to need, that time, hopefully when we secure the core, hopefully that time can go into the literacies that our students are going to need for the workplace of the future. So it's really about the instructional time and being able to address all of the literacies that the students need. Math and reading, yes, but hopefully once the core is secured, that we can really look at infusing innovation down, you know, horizontally across.
So I would like to see, you know, a concrete plan moving forward before I vote. I'm not going to vote blindly on, you know, reduction in world language or tech ed and just say more math. So you're explaining more to me now, but like we need a full plan. Otherwise, I'm not going to just cross my fingers and just say, I hope that math will get better because I'm voting to add more math. Like, I'm not going to do that. So I need to have that full concrete plan. What's it really look like? I need to know what all these teams are doing. We really need to see a full presentation on a new structure, 5 through 8 in math. And once that's presented to us here on the screen, slide by slide, we could ask even more questions. I think that would be valuable. We can do that. That, absolutely. And I also want to say that I applaud teachers who are putting courses forward. I think that we need to provide the right guidance at the board level down to our administration to say, we want courses to be added that will help our school performance profile. And that will, courses that will help us with, our reading and our math, courses that will help us with our biology keystone test. Our literature's not too bad at the high school, but our biology and our Algebra 1 keystone tests are low. So if there's a bioremediation class, an Algebra 1 remediation class, other classes that can possibly be added, if you're going to add, let's add things that will help those areas that I just mentioned. I am not going to vote adding these social studies classes when obviously, what we were just discussing, that is the core. You just mentioned the core. So we need to be great at the core before we start, expanding and expanding and expanding. We're going to lose sight on what is important, and that is the foundation for these children, and it is reading and math. I'm done. Thank you.
So I agree with like 95% of what you just said. I think that we do an awful job, like we've discussed before in the curriculum committee, of our reading programs are not consistent. We don't offer enough supports at the intermediate math levels. We have a lot of struggling students with reading or math, and I think that's our number one thing that we absolutely need to address, and I trust our administration is addressing that. That's why we put all of those items in the strategic plan, so that over the next several years, we would address them and we would be benchmarking them regularly, getting those report cards regularly, and seeing how we're progressing along. But I guess I just don't see what our high school social studies coordinator could do to help with those efforts. Like, I think we can address those efforts with the pertinent staff at the elementary level and the middle school level, and it needs to be a huge focus of our resources. But I don't think that adding a, for example, AP microeconomics course that could just be half of the year and still have the same teacher teach it, and potentially improving our AP scores, which is a huge part of improving our profile, because our AP participation and pass rates are terrible in Bethel Park compared to adjacent school districts. Like, I think we can do both those things that are beneficial for our students concurrently. I don't think that, we have to just focus on one. I think we can let the people that need to focus on one thing, and let our social studies coordinator and social studies staff focus on the other.
I guess I disagree because the reading program's been an issue probably for almost a decade, and the math has been an issue, I would say, between 5 to 10 years or so. So doing multiple things, I understand where you're coming from, but we need to get our house in order from the foundation up. And I'm sticking to it. I'm sticking with reading and math all the way through. That will build the foundation for these kids to do well in all these other AP classes. If you go through the social studies document, in there it talks about prerequisites for scores in reading for PSSAs to take a course. Well, there you go. Like, if we're not focusing on that foundation first, some students won't be able to actually take that class because they won't meet the prerequisites. So again, I think we need to slam the brakes here for a minute, invest our time, our effort, resources into those areas, because honestly, it doesn't look like Bethel Park can do more than one thing at a time. Like, there's proof that for the last 10 years, those two areas are weak. So if we can do multiple things, why isn't it done by now? It's not done, and it's not done correctly. So we have a new team, and I'm very excited about our administrative team. I'm just bringing this all to the table. I know this goes back before a lot of the people that have been hired. So I'm bringing it to the table now. I believe in the team, and I think that they can do it. I'm just frustrated. I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and I could already see in kindergarten that There's, homework coming home that looks different from other kindergarten classes, from other buildings and things like that. So I am seeing things at that ground level, okay? And I am the one that if I see that, they're bringing home a certain type of homework and it's not matching up to something else, I'm filling in that gap. I'm doing the work at the kitchen table with my wife and my son. Should that be happening? I mean, I'm more than happy to always help with the homework, whatever it is, but I want it to be consistent. Like, everybody's paying taxes here. Everybody's expecting the same level of education. We want the same level of education in all 5 buildings, in all of our classes. Well, in consistency, continuity, I want to see it. So, again, I want to make this point that I definitely believe that this administration can do it. It's just going to take time. It's a large system. I think they've heard me loud and clear, and I think the rest of the board. I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I know I've had discussions with individual board members at different times, and they know how important reading and math is for our students.
Mr. Grisbeck, I'd also like to point out until the summer of 2019, our AP books were 10 years old because the prior board and the prior administration didn't think it was necessary until it was brought up that those AP books did not meet the requirements for the AP exams anymore either. So I would, caution you that we need to look at with the new books and the updated curriculum where those AP exams go before we add any more.
Right, that makes sense. I think
Question
that's
that I
definitely
had also on this AP macro.
Micro, I think.
No, the macro that's listed.
Oh.
That's like a 2015 copyright date, but the AP European History is 2010. Is that still eligible to even be used as a reference? Because I remember this.
Right, it came up in
A couple of years ago,
2019.
biology. We've got the biology AP department new textbooks because they were actually they weren't conforming to AP standards.
Isn't it?
I thought everything was at 10 years. I was pretty sure most of it was 10 years.
I would have to agree. I think it is right around the 10-year mark.
Okay. So right now, of the AP classes, it's AP European History that looks like it's 2010.
One last point about these, the both social studies courses. It's going to be very limited. Like you might have, between 20 to 60 kids maybe take either one of the classes. I don't know. Again, they're electives. But again, the math and the reading, you have 4,000 kids in this system. And guess what? They're all going through the reading program. They're all going through our math program, right? Not all 4,000 kids are going to take microeconomics or macroeconomics or some of these other electives. That's what I mean. Like, every single household will benefit if the reading and the math are absolutely top notch. Because then once they've mastered those 2 areas, the parents are not going to have to worry too much. They're going to do really well in any elective that they take, as long as their foundation's good. I'm just stressing it again and again. I am so passionate about this, and I hope that it's heard loud and clear.
I agree that we do need to work on the core, which obviously you all know. But I agree with Dan that not offering these 2 social studies courses at the high school does not in any way provide their teams who are working on math and reading in elementary grades anything extra. In essence, we are just not providing additional courses for a completely unrelated reason. And at some point, like, are we going to wait until all the kids who are currently in kindergarten get to high school before we offer additional social studies courses? There's only one social studies course on the list that has less than 18 students and actually has 13. We have music classes here that have 4. I understand that we need to focus on academics. However, if you're going to go to that point, I suppose social studies is academic. And a lot of music that we offer is not required. And I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't support cutting the music program until we get kindergarten reading figured out. So I'm in support of those social studies courses. And I also think that our administration is working very hard, coming into the district and assessing what's going on and building the relationships and working towards making those improvements.
For the one social studies course, the contributions one, are the standards covered in any other courses? Did you guys do a review of that?
Curriculum mapping, per se, is not something that has been flexible or fluid. There are definitely some contractual barriers, as is. People are waiting in line to write curriculum. Clearly, when I would go to department meetings, that would be what people would tell me. I want to write curriculum. We need to write curriculum. We need to update curriculum. But to what you're saying, the literacy standards do transcend. Sorry, maybe
Well, I'm talking about, so the social studies course, the one contributions class, is when looking at those standards, are those standards covered in any of the other social studies classes? Yes or no?
Yes, some of the standards listed on the scope and sequence that they provided
How
would
many-
be covered in other classes.
How many of them?
We didn't run a tally comparison. We don't have that, available at this point. But for instance, one of the standards is to evaluate state and federal powers based on significant documents and other critical sources, such as the Declaration of Independence. That is covered in other courses.
So you didn't do like a full cross-referencing and check from what we already have compared to this class that's being offered? Like standard to standard? Like,
Those maps don't exist per se to be able to do that analysis. That's where
you mean to look at, no, the standards that they provided in the document for this contributions class, did you look at existing social studies classes to see if we're already covering those standards, all of those standards, somewhere else in the other courses?
there are not existing maps that list all the standards for all of the social.
Did you use the, what about the SAS site? Yeah,
You're talking, so
yeah,
those are the state standards.
correct. That's what
Those are there. No, to my knowledge, that analysis was not done. This was a report that was provided to enlighten the board on, I believe it started last year, this course.
Well,
Not the course, but this document was submitted to the board last year.
Do you know what grade level should the standards cover for that particular course?
So the standards referenced in this document are the 11, 12 standards.
Okay.
11th and 12th grade standards.
All right, so there's definitely some issues with what's being said right now, because I went through it. I went through the SAS site. I did a complete cross-reference, and I did it and color-coded everything across the board.
I'm referring to district curriculum.
No.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
talking
sorry, I
about
did
state
too.
standards. I cross-referenced everything in 2 different color highlighters and went through it, and I found that 11 out of the 14 standards are already taught in American government. And so the remaining 3 standards, one is taught in American history. And the other 2 standards, I'm shocked, okay? One is a 2nd grade standard, and the other one is a 3rd grade standard. There's no reason why we should have a 2nd or 3rd grade standard in that course. Am I right? I mean, you should never have, at an 11th or 12th grade level, those standards should be covered at 2nd grade and 3rd grade. Why would they even be listed here? So technically, if you remove those 2, you have 12 standards left. 11 are covered in American government, and 1 is covered in U.S. history. I guess I'm a little bit frustrated is that as a board member, I probably shouldn't be doing all this. And somebody else should be doing this. So again, I'm absolutely not going to vote to add any classes until we focus on reading and math.
So based on those numbers you said, you're saying it's redundant? The
It's
classes-
redundant. Yes, it's extremely redundant. Why would you do that? I don't know why you would do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's where we are.
Yeah.
I don't think that it is redundant because it is looking at those things from the perspective of groups who were fighting for their rights. And were those particular groups and those particular things that occurred in our history taught in the class you're referring to? And honestly, they ought to be, but since they're not, the only place they're going to be taught is in this course. So I feel that that does make it different.
Did you, just out of curiosity, look at the overlap for European history compared to U.S. history, like to see how many
What?
in the subsequent year of European
No, I
history
didn't look
overlap
at
the state standards?
I didn't look at European history.
I'm just curious if that's like a regular thing that would happen if we would look at our AP year or just our regular European history course and then compare it to the previous year's American history if the
Again,
state standards already overlapped.
I'm a board member. I probably shouldn't be doing
Oh, I
all
agree.
of this.
I fully agree.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
spent, I don't know, 2-3 hours of my own time going through this. I wish I would get, I think I deserve some of the pay for doing some of this. I'm a little exhausted from it.
The analysis is good, though. It seems to be good. I'm not an expert in it, but it seems like it identifies areas of overlap and maybe opportunities to optimize our curriculum so that we don't have that overlap. So we're not redundant across classes so that you don't have 30 classes to choose from or 20 classes to choose from and they all kind of overlap each other. That's not very efficient from an instructional delivery standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint.
Right. We just talked about how many classes that are under 18 or whatever.
Right.
So you add 2 more classes, then this could be a potential problem too. You add 2 more classes, then it's this novelty. Oh, 2 new classes. A bunch of kids take it. They're excited. It's new. They don't know what it is. They're going to take it. And then there's always a leveling off. And I know this even from my own personal experience in education. Usually when classes come online, there's a little bit of an excitement because it's new. And then the novelty will wear off a little bit. And then guess what? During that bubble where you have an increase, you may have to add a teacher depending on the amount of teachers you're pulling over to social studies. So all of a sudden you need a social studies certified teacher. If the numbers go up enough because you're drawing from other departments, then you may have to add another teacher. Then the numbers level off and go back down, and then guess what? You're stuck with an extra social studies teacher. Is that a valuable way of using our resources when we have elementary students in classes of 25 and 26? Like, no, it's not. This is extremely frustrating this evening, everyone. I am sorry, but I've done a lot of I've done a lot of work on this, and we have a lot of work to do.
Right. I think to your point, Mr. Christensen, like that's a very real possibility that our social studies courses could just overlap in state standards on a regular basis. And it could just be the case that our European course may just have the intent of teaching European history, whereas our, U.S. history class would have the purpose of teaching U.S. history. And this history class would have the purpose of teaching a history through, a lens that has been historically ignored in typical high school history classes. So I guess that would be my take on it. But I see your point, Mr. Scalzo, and I think it's a very valid one in that we are shortchanging students in quite a few areas that are, in my opinion, more important than this one. I guess it just comes back to I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I think we're also shortchanging students that are in high school that are already past the point of the K-5 curriculum, and at least the way that I laid out the AP microeconomics course, for example, you'd be utilizing no additional teachers. You'd only be providing advantage to students. And I guess my follow-up question would be like, where do we have to get to add more courses? Like, do we have to reach a certain, is the standardization of the reading curriculum, because I agree that's like one of our biggest, I can't believe this is a thing, that students are having such different reading curriculums. Do we need to get there before you'd be comfortable?
I don't know what the exact number is. I don't know.
Understood.
I don't know what percentage growth.
Right.
I would have to say, who am I to say I need to see 5% growth in math or 10% growth or whatever? I don't know the answer to that. I just know that we need solutions for these problems in these areas. And I would like to see some type of change, and also some type of evidence showing that the changes that were made actually show growth and show that our students are doing well. I don't know how long that'll take, and I have no idea what the time frame.
Understood, yeah.
I have no idea how to even answer that question. That's
Okay.
not even a fair question.
I think
I just
part of
wanna-
it is just understanding where we are as a district and what are some of the things we can do to improve, both from an academic performance standpoint, but also cost. When you look at our student-to-teacher ratios for Bethel Park Elementary and Secondary, we're around 15 to 1, 15.5 to 1 in terms of our students per teacher. If you look at Upper St. Clair and Mount Lebanon, they're a couple points higher, okay? 16 to 1, 17 to 1. So that's why our costs per student are about 10% higher than Upper St. Clair and about 20% higher than Mount Lebanon. And I don't feel like we're getting 10% more benefit, 20% more benefit out of the investments that we're making. But as we start creating more complexity around our curriculum, it's hard to isolate what are the cost drivers and how do we control those cost drivers? Or, throw out cost, what are the performance drivers and how do I isolate performance drivers and focus on those performance drivers? If we're just adding to the soup, of all these classes. So I think that, what Vince brought up is something that we should have. We should have that specialty, that focus within our administration to really understand performance and cost drivers within our district so that we can then take action on it. Choose to hire new, choose to not, replace vacancies, okay? Choose to add, choose to reduce courses. But right now, it's just soup. Nobody knows the answers. We know it at a very high level, but nobody knows what are those drivers that we need to really focus on. How do we come up with priorities to focus on? Nobody knows. It's just soup.
I just want to say, Mr. Scalzo, I appreciate your analysis because I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. To look at the state standards and say, okay, are we meeting these in any other course? I just appreciate that perspective, and I appreciate the work that you put into that. And I agree with 100% of what you said.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that was a great analysis. We all own this, okay? I'm sorry, I've been looking your way because you are the curriculum table, okay? But I should be looking at everybody, okay? Because we're all a part of this. But, we do have to get a better understanding of our cost and performance drivers so that we can all focus on those and make those priorities. No more preaching.
Okay. So.
Are you done yet?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. Okay. I would like items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 to be moved to the consent agenda. That is leaving off 1 and 6. We're leaving off 1 and 6.
Okay, everybody agree with that? Okay. Very good. On to item number 2. Mr. McGregor, Personnel Committee, can you walk us through those?
Sure. Okay, under personnel, we have 9 items. I'll read them out. Approval of extra duty responsibility program. 2, acceptance of resignations. 3, appointment of personnel. 4, change of assignment. 5, approval of unpaid leave of absence. 6, and I just lost it. Go. Approval of admin tuition reimbursement. 7 is approval of leave of absence. 8, the approval of extended school year program. And 9, approval of staffing changes. Any discussion? Okay, with no discussion,
Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
I can't even get there yet. Approval of resignations. Number 4 on the Can you address that and where thought process is moving forward?
Yeah, auditorium coordinator.
The auditorium coordinator?
Yeah, so right now, the auditorium coordinator, Jessica Koval's last day is May 11th. We have a couple options in-house to take us to the end of the year. However, going forward, that's internal discussions we're having right now. As of today, we were still throwing around ideas. So that's something that will definitely come to you once there's a couple different options and see which route we want to take with that.
So I believe that position was one we just created a couple years ago because
Correct.
we had a for the club. I think there's a club, and maybe the sponsor of the club was kind of doing some of this work.
Yeah, it was in the extra duties at the
It's
in the
extra duty,
CBA.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think we'd be looking to you to say, is this required?
It's definitely not required, but that's kind of what we're trying to evaluate right now. Is
Yeah.
a lot of the biggest part of the responsibility of this auditorium coordinator was to bring outside groups into the auditorium.
Okay.
The question is, with COVID hit in the last couple of years, that wasn't being done.
Correct.
So then the decision is that something that moving forward that the district and the administration is that top priority again? If it is, then that's something that we take into account. If it is not, that's something we also take into account.
Okay. Well, this isn't a motion to open a position. It's just notifying us to accept the resignation. So that's fine. If you can work on, a proposal.
Absolutely.
Summer, whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, Darren.
Okay, let's try this again. 1 through 9, I move to add those to the consent agenda.
Are you okay with that? Any objections to that? Okay. Let's move those 9 to the consent agenda. Mr. Greisbeck.
Okay, we
Finance.
have 14 items tonight under Finance Committee. Number 1, April 2022 salaries and bills. 2, March 2022 financial report. 3, budgetary transfers. 4, revision to fund balance commitment. 5, items declared unused and unnecessary. 6, payment for repair of the Bethel Park High School art classroom. 7, acceptance of Remake Learning Days mini grant. 8, Bethel Park Education Foundation grant acceptance. 9, approval of Draw Collective agreement. 10, Bethel Park Community Foundation grant acceptance. 11, approval of Steele Center for Career and Technical Education resolution number 6 TAC 2022. 12, acceptance of High Five transition grant. 13, payment for Independent Middle School Phase 1 renovations. 14, payment for Independence Middle School Phase 2 renovations. Does anyone have any questions on any of those 14 items?
With our levy that we're facing with Steele Center, do we know, Doug, when we talked about this in the presentation, do we know where it'll hit us in terms of our annual debt financing?
Your annual debt commitment for that project will be about $512,000 annually. You have you own about 7.1 or 7.2 of that bond issue, and it would be annually increase your debt service by $512,000.
Okay.
That's the estimate right now. Obviously, those numbers could change once they sell the bonds.
And they are taking out the bond, not us, so it doesn't hurt
They take
our
on the.
borrowing.
We all have a share in the bond, but typically what happens is they coordinate the payments. So they'll send me an invoice for our debt portion, and they'll coordinate the payment for the bond.
Okay. But it doesn't hurt our borrowing capacity?
No, it doesn't go against our borrowing capacity.
Okay.
Any other questions? Dr. Walsh, I noticed a few different grants on here. How do we go about procuring those?
Some of them written by administrators, some written by teachers.
Okay, well, thank you to our administrators and teachers who went ahead and took the initiative to get us those grants, because that money definitely helps. Other question I had was for the items declared unused and not necessary, just because I'm curious, Mr. McCausland, what's the plan for those? Is there any plan yet, or that's kind of still to be determined?
Let me refresh my memory on what the items were.
I believe they were Spanish books, but...
The textbooks typically will reach out to used textbooks companies if they can use them. But other than that, if they do not want them, then they'll just be discarded.
Okay, sounds good.
I have a question. Dr. Walsh, are they going to make that final correction to the draw agreement? Because it's still...
Yeah, I'm sorry that nobody
Okay.
could take my call today, so that.
No, it's not your
difference in
fault.
number is,
I just wanted to make sure that we don't accidentally.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any final questions?
It can just be corrected before you vote on it next week.
We'll just have to make sure we double
Still
check
make
that
it
and
consent
that it's correct
agenda.
before we approve it. Okay, hearing no more questions, I move items 1 through 14 to the consent agenda for next week.
Any objections? Okay. So all 14 go. And E, Policy Committee. Ms. Turner.
For the policy committee, number 1 and number 2, I moved to consent agenda for third and final reading. Number 3, it's the second reading on parent, guardian, intermediate relative as coaches. Policy number 4 is approval of policy for the first reading, the trauma information approach. And I believe this is all based on information that Dr. Jansani had already implemented. We're just following up with it, and it is all coming out of policies that were passed by the state last spring, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We are required by Pennsylvania code to have a threat assessment team in each building, and then this policy would sort of back up that team's purpose and direct the administration to maintain a threat assessment team in each building. There's also a bit about using that team to help with trauma and student
Correct.
trauma.
And then the number 5, revisions to policies. I am asking that policy 237, electronic devices, be pulled from the first read and redirected back to the policy committee. There's some extensive language in there that I want to relook at. I just talked with the solicitor who had just started to review that information, so we would like to relook at that. Other than that, for first reading, it's student discipline 218, 222, student expression, dissemination of materials, 227, controlled substance and paraphernalia, 808, food services, and 916, volunteers.
So for next Tuesday.
1 and 2 go
1
on.
and 2 should go on
the
the
consent
consent
agenda, unless anybody has any objections.
Okay, add 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Any public comments on anything related to the school? No? Any call-ins?
No callers.
Okay, any board comments?
I'm tired.
Okay. No comments? Nobody? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned.